Hi, everybody. My name is Ramadan Ameen. Today, we're going to talk about impact investing, how to exceed investor expectations. So first, just a little bit about me. So I'm 43. I was in the military for 8.5 years, focused on engineering, mechanical engineering. I worked at NATO headquarters for 2.5 of those years. Spent some time in Honduras, Afghanistan, in intelligence space, etc. While there, I began to understand that we sent a number of entrepreneurs to Iraq through NATO to begin to understand as we were looking to go in at how we can suitably leave and ensure that there are entrepreneurs that would go in and fill the gap that was created. And that's when I began to understand that I could have more impact and do more as an entrepreneur than I could as a military officer. And that's when I made the conscious decision to decide whether I was going to look at business or politics. And I chose business. So after I left that I went to business school at Columbia, learned about business enterprise and finance entrepreneurship, moved to China, did the same thing in China, and then stayed there and started a logistics business out there. And it really just helped me begin to understand that that communication is really where intelligence and expectations can be stated. And inside communication is culture. So to be able to speak the language, I had to really just sort of lose myself and identity and begin to explore what it meant to be Chinese and what it meant to have the sort of signal response relay that goes on with people. But as a result of that, I've just become, in general, more reflective on what the expectation is. And I will sort of start my presentation by just telling you I will never forget when I ordered soup in China and actually got the soup. I got vegetable soup with tofu, broccoli, some lettuce, yes, lettuce, and a number of other what I thought were good things, and no MSG. And I managed to do it by using my words. And I didn't cry, but I got very sensitive and just told myself to never forget that it was the best experience. And that experience was me ordering something and getting exactly what I ordered. And that, for me, helped me begin to understand what excellence is. Excellence is getting exactly what I expect. Okay, so a little bit about us at Stone Digital. We are an early stage startup, and that means that we're creating something new, right? We are creating a digital investment bank. We have a platform that effectively reduces the friction for merchant banking. So that would be issuances, recapitalization, seeking financing, reaching out for financing from others. And as a result, we think the important part of being part of that transaction is to begin to measure that transaction and put the measurements that we take someplace. And that requires that we begin to manage that asset. Even if we are not authorized to, we need to put that data someplace. And that data sits with the digital version of that asset. The other is just simply digital and impact transformation. So as you'll begin to hear through this presentation, I believe that every project has impact. And now effectively, is it good or is it bad? But there's impact, and you can't even really begin to fathom that until you understand it. So let's start. So this is my question to all of you, like, what is good? What's good? And so I've got the chat here where people can go ahead and answer the question of what is good. This will also help me understand just who's in the room with me. So Banky, she's a digital transformation specialist. Like, what is good? You can just go ahead and just write in the chat what's good. I have an answer, so like we can go directly to it. But I'd like to just get a sense of how are you thinking about what's good before we go forward. Okay, so all right. David? All right. So the idea or the question is going to be, all right, well, what's the context for it? So where I was going with this and what I'd like people to understand or arrive is that good is a vague concept, but in this case, an effective providing a project that brings benefits. Okay, great. So that's good within the context of impact, right? So what I wanted to get down to is that when we begin to define like what good is, or find brings a benefit, ultimately the question of benefit is to whom, right? And why are we providing that benefit? And even more precisely and specifically, how do we know we're getting that benefit, and how do we know in general, right? So when we're in a relationship with somebody and we're moving forward together, that's correct. We are becoming interconnected as a human species. So that interconnection goes down to what's really good is ultimately at the end of the day, it's trust. It's trust. It is that when I say I'm going to be there, I'm going to be there. And when you say you're not going to be there, you're not. And then when you show up, it's a surprise. And it could be a pleasant surprise because there's one more seat at the table that you had an invite to after you RSVP'd you weren't going to come. Another possibility is that you RSVP, you weren't going to come, and you come, and the entire thing wasn't scheduled or set up for you. And that is the act of what is good and bad being relative to what the expectation is. RSVP, there's a table for 10, I put somebody else in place, you show up, there's 11, you cause me a problem. RSVP for 10, you don't arrive, and now I have 9 I've got to deal with effectively getting rid of that place. I do, and then you show up anyways. And again, like I've got a place for you, but you didn't meet my expectation, and that's where the challenge occurs, right? The expectation. Let's go to the next slide. So when I look at and what I want to talk to you about is from a takeaway perspective, there are 3 takeaways that I'd like you to take, which is that to effectively invest with impact, one must effectively meet expectations, not exceed them, define the benchmark, and innovate through embracing constraints. And if you do not remember anything and remember those things, meet the expectation, define the benchmark, and innovate through embracing constraints, then I will say and I will believe that you got what I have to give. Now, I think ultimately when you are looking at going into the space, and you're already in this space, and some of you have been in the space longer than I have, there's lots of Googleable information. There's lots of people you can talk to provide you experts. There's Jen. There's a number of resources out there. But if I have to impart what I know, it is this. And if you can do this, you win, right? So after I left China and I came back to the States, I worked at BlackRock, which is a great shop run by Larry Fink, who's a great man who believes in one thing. If you take care of the customer, not the shareholder, then you will always be in business. And if you seek to deliver value to them and you align your values to servicing that customer, then the customer will always keep you in business, right? So what does that mean, really? And how do I take that going forward? So in that space, I was in back office, middle office, and front office. And I began to understand that stories tell and facts sell. People don't want to actually look at the messenger. They want to look at the message. And so when you think about, or when an investor is looking at placing their capital with you, they really want to understand that you factually know your business. Yes, there's an element of likability, but most importantly, if you win, they like you. And that's something we must not forget. So what impact would exceed expectations have on your investors is something you need to understand. Ask them questions like, hey, and again, I'm going to use this example of an invitation where you didn't RSVP and now the table is closed. And so let's talk about just investing in general. So the investor has a pie, they have strategically determined how they're going to allocate their assets across that pie to generate the returns they need, whether it be to meet their obligations, their liabilities, or just plan for the future. And when they look at their high risk uh, and look at the returns for those, they're allocating a portion of that investment specifically to you. And so when you begin to understand what the expectations are and what the rest of their portfolio looks like, you understand your role and what you're delivering to them from a value perspective. And if you don't understand that, then I would encourage you to ask them what happens if we beat it. Do we get more money? If we do beat it, then should we, and if we beat it halfway through the year, should we, from our side of the house, as the investee or the CIO of the fund or the project, should we take those returns and give them back to the investor because we've met the expectation and now they can do something else with it, but it's their decision to do. Another thing that's important about meeting expectations is not experimenting with the investor money. So if you've already met your expectations and you want to do something different, communicate that. Understand or set a new expectation. Allow them to make the choice. When you make the choice for your investor, you are changing the rules of the game. And if you change the rules of the game, the outcome is something that's effectively sorry, I'm looking at just looking at some of your comments. When we change the rules of the game, and we don't at the same time manage the expectations or have another discussion, then there begins to just be this sort of this challenge that occurs in the relationship. And the last is experimenting with data. So you don't experiment with investors' money, but you do experiment with data, and that brings about what I consider the next point I have, which is in every project that you take on, there's data to be collected. There's something that's happening. There's a cause and there's effect, and that effect is cascading in many areas. If you are, simple example would be a ground up and build for real estate where there's an impact study that's done. But there's more than just that occurs. People are now walking to the area. They're moving around. They hadn't moved before. And all of these things are ideas that you understand. But if you don't, or if one doesn't begin defining what that impact is or collecting the data around it, then one can't begin to manage what's not effectively collected or measured. Okay. So defining the benchmark. What's that mean to me? Well, it means that when you do set the expectation, you still need to internally determine whether you're good or bad, or before you have the conversation, define exactly how you're going to run your investment, whether it be your project, whether it be something else. I think you know this already. I feel like you do. But some of these things are really basic. But when you look at success or failure is defined by just simply not meeting the basic expectations. This is not rocket science, and I want you to know that if you understand the expectation and meet the expectation, you have given me my bowl of soup, and I am over the moon with happiness. And as an investor, if I'm allocating my portfolio accordingly, and you have indicated what your benchmark is for performance, and you meet it, then I, as an investor, will manage my portfolio accordingly. But if you don't meet the benchmark, if you start doing hoops, or you experiment with my money, or you don't maintain communication around my expectation, or don't understand what else I'm doing, then you're not exceeding the expectation. And so again, this is a bit of a head flip here, but understand that the expectation is excellence. Exceeding that is now doing something that you said you wouldn't do, and that's it. So automate your reporting. So in many cases, there are a number of projects where people want to be impact related, and I've got air quotes up with that, those of you that aren't seeing me. And that simply means that they might be feeding in or going to another data source to track some data around what they're doing. And I encourage you to begin to think through, A, how much that will cost you, and B, how can you really think through your project from soup to nuts to understand what you're generating, understand where the data is being collected, and begin to automate your reporting. So again, in many cases, if in fact your investor trusts you to make a decision to bring about and drive good, understand exactly what they're trusting you to do. And anything else that's extra, provide them that data, or don't, and keep it for yourself and begin to explore what the implications or insights that come out of that data. But the expectation is clear, and if you set it and you understand it, then you manage that benchmark, then you're doing a great job. Now, define the negative impact. So this picture right here talks a little bit about risk, and based on risk, you can understand that there is a return that comes with it. And when you begin to move from cash and money to impact, and what that might mean for your business or for the project that you're taking on, you get to really get intimate with your thesis related to data. And if you are doing that, then you're able to understand the negative impact. So that's the best example I can give you. And I will bring this up one more time, is the vehicle. When we were building out a vehicle, we did understand that we were transforming fuel from fuel to actually to gas, which is a phase change. But we measured the impact, the horsepower that we could generate, but we didn't necessarily measure the negative impact. And because we didn't measure the negative impact, we didn't manage for it. We didn't put at the back of the exhaust can any type of filter that allowed us to capture some of the particulates. So we just simply release gas, or release something that's less harmful to the environment. Now, I understand we didn't understand that, but as an engineer, as a mechanical engineer studying what's called the phase shift, there is a concept that there needs to be a cycle with any type of system. There needs to be a door open, a door closed. There needs to be an understanding of the impact, and then transforming of what you did to something that's usable. Everything else that's waste, the impact of that waste needs to be considered, and that's the negative impact. So as we wrap up, because of time, I want to sort of talk about innovation through embracing your constraints. And so in many times, I'm just going to go next to this next slide. So this is, I think, and this is where I sort of have this personal thing about precision and laziness, right? And so when you look at this continuum of what is finance only versus finance first and ESG and screening, there is a version of this where you can actually put all the circles on top of each other by collecting data, by providing more information about your projects, such that every project does have impact, negative or positive, and we can begin to sit and define one space, one circle that sits right on top of each other, and get a sense of exactly what the impact of your project is. So be precise, stick to facts. And in many cases, when looking at explaining what you're doing to an investor, if you use tropes or anecdotes or phrases that are universally understood or applied, because of the cultural context of the actual listener, they're not always going to understand exactly what you mean. And so when looking at having these conversations, you need to get more granular, even if your investor isn't able to do so. And that might mean just taking more time. Don't get impatient. Be focused on what they've understood. Have someone on your team specifically focus on the investor. Look at their face. When are they writing things down? When are they not writing things down? Do they look like they understand? Did they phase out? Are they looking at their watch? If you can't get to the part where you can be precise with them, then you can't begin to understand whether your words have landed on them at all. And if it hasn't, then it might mean that you need to embrace the constraint of how you communicate with them, break things down, look at the actual activity that you're doing and break it down to its actual components. And the reason why I say this is that as we are building out our own business and our own capabilities, I oftentimes find myself in front of an investor who doesn't understand what we're doing. And that might mean that the business model itself is okay, but I haven't broken down our business into the core elements that are simple. And simple businesses win. Simple businesses are easier to understand, and they're much more more impactful when it comes to measuring what you're doing and all the different details. So we believe at Stone that every project is an impact project, and that means that sometimes there's negative impact and positive impact. And if you don't know it, then I would question whether you're on the right platform, you thought it through enough, or you need to bring on a team of people that have a different type of capability than is currently on your team. And that is where you can have a long-lasting impact. Oftentimes, the need is really what drives innovation, right? And if you embrace your constraints, and you need, yes, yeah, they'll be available. The slides will be available for review afterwards. If you're going to embrace your constraints, then you now have a need to perform from an investment perspective, provide reporting, and at the same time deliver on expectations. And it's not hard to do. It just requires you to be precise with the challenge you're trying to tackle, be precise with your investor, tell them the facts, and allow them to, with those facts, manage their own portfolio and put you in a place where they can invest in your initiative, your project, your fund with the appropriate expectation. Hiding those, providing some type of phrase or my favorite one, I always use it a lot, and I won't go into it. It's like, to be a successful entrepreneur, you need to fail, right? That's not true. And if in fact someone says, oh yes, it is, I will go a step further and say, if you failed, you're done. Or I'm not going to go down this path, but I'm happy to have a conversation with someone offline about that. But ultimately, it's just a setback. There's a pivot. There's a need to really understand what happened. You learn that this way didn't work. But if you use the word failure, the context of failure for every person means something different. And so if I am hearing you say failure, to be successful, I need to do that, then I need to pass that gate. And that's a gate I set. And that's quite personal, which prevents anybody from really truly being able to be successful. So again, what gets measured gets managed. And if you can't measure it, you can't manage it. If you have an investment, every investment you have is an impact project, whether it be negative or positive. If you don't understand it, leverage technology to get there and then automate. So with tech, every investment is an impact investment. And if you want to push back on that, I'm happy to have that debate with you. And if I don't win, then I think we'll both go away learning something different. So here's my secrets. These are things that as a 43-year-old Black man in America, I've arrived at, and I don't normally share these things with people. So congratulations, here we go. Your investment gives you the right to measure. So because your capital is involved, you have the ability to get insights that nobody else has the ability to get. And yes, you need to be responsible for those insights. You need to account for what you're doing there. But when you do, you can begin to impact and affect change in a greater way. It's oftentimes what BlackRock is doing with their corporate governance initiatives. They have rights. So understand that those rights give you something. You can also simply ask someone else to provide measure. Oh, great. Thank you, Selena. You can also ask somebody else to measure information for you. And if they don't, and you're interested in buying some technology to allow you or to install to help you get measurements or to automate measurements, then do it. But again, that is also potentially a separate investment that you might have to finance on your own. But the important thing here is that you understand that you have the right to measure. Secondly, you're a hero in your own story, and there's only happy endings. So there's lots of people that say there's no such thing as a Hollywood ending, but I'm going to tell you something that again is a secret. Every story is written by a person, and a good writer sticks with what's realistic, not magical fairy tale land. That means that if you watch a hero in a TV show, there's actually events that go in place. The hero prepares. The hero is lucky. The hero thrives and has a problem and succeeds. But the hero sometimes doesn't show up, and other people help that hero show up. And I'm here to tell you that you're a hero and stories only have happy endings. And so, if in fact you want to do something, you can do it. And if in fact you expect to deliver impact to your client or to your investor, you can. But that requires you to be very upfront and precise with what you're delivering slash selling, so that the investor can make a decision based on facts. A lot of times they need to trust you, and trust, I believe, creates reliability and creates likability in many cases, because they know where to put you. You're not surprising them. And so as you build out your own story, there are adversities, there are, failures that hit you, but those are simply just roadblocks or speed bumps or milestones. Um, and that's actually one of the reasons why I watch television, because I look at the various scenarios that people come across or navigate, and I leverage those same scenarios to drive my own situations. Uh, Lastly, precision creates the path. So, I had a bad day. That's not precise. That's actually just simply a fact, but that's also relative. But I could say I had technical difficulties. That's a bit more specific when it comes to what happened. Another one would be that when I logged in under a different login name than I did that needed to log in for this. And the more precise we get, the more the answer reveals itself. And so sometimes, like the idea of the 5 whys or the 7 whys that one looks at to really get to the root cause of the problem, the intention there, and I think like this is the idea of somebody sharing with you a narrative that is not even precise. Someone says, you know what, in general, if you ask 7 whys, you can get down to the root of most problems. And I would say, okay, fine, that might be true, it might not be true, but instead I'm going to tell you this. If you get precise with what the issue is, then you can solve it. And if you don't, you cannot. You can come close, you can beat around the bush, but somebody else is going to beat you because they were precise and you weren't. And so oftentimes ask yourself, are you precise? Have you given the investor enough information so they can make decisions for themselves? Are you committed to the outcome, and can you drive that outcome, not from an experiment perspective because you know it? And if you don't, slow down. Ask yourself some more questions. Why don't I know it? What is the unknown here? What can't I control? How can I control it? Is my team the right team to do that? And am I leveraging data and technology the right way so that I can collect the information needed to begin managing the impact? Okay, so the future is written by your pen. Again, it's a secret only because they say the past is prologue, right? Which I think is kind of funny because true, the past is prologue. So find the prologue you like and let that be the past that you write the future with. And I believe that is true. So, and if you want to debate that, you can. But again, because I'm the hero of my own story, and that's what I deliver, then if you're on my team, that's what we write. We write the future with our own pen, and we might have to look back at a narrative someplace else that effectively allows us to have a platform in which we can be successful. But that's the challenge, and that's the hard work. And that's where we can begin to look at what I think the last part is, which is when you open the door, you have to close it after you go through it. So what does that really mean? It means that throughout history, there have always been impact projects. There's always been a relative result of everything we do, right? So again, the vehicle issue, we created the ability to travel long distances, to see families, to allow commerce to move more freely because we have vehicles to do it. But we didn't actually look at everything we did when we opened that door. We transformed something from a liquid state to a gas state, and that like I'm almost crying with like what that's done for us. It's moved our country, our world forward, but it's also created the worst air quality issue that this world has ever seen. And that's a door that we opened and we did not close. And so as we look at technology and as we look at our ability to measure and what we're doing with that, understand that every project is an impact, or every project has an impact. And if you haven't begun measuring it, then I think you're lazy. I think that you haven't gotten precise enough. I think that it might be that you just didn't spend enough time setting it up. Measure twice, cut once, or as my uncle always says, we never have time to do it right the first time, but we always have time to do it over again. And I challenge you to sort of take that with you as you look at the projects you're doing. Get precise, understand the narrative, define the narrative you want. There are truly only happy endings. And lastly, when you open a door, absolutely close it. Absolutely understand what you're doing and account for all of it. That's it. Bye bye. Thanks, everybody.